I mean, you get nervous here and there when it's going, I don't want to say easy, but when the score is in your favor.
The tennis world just got hit with something nobody saw coming. And if you think you already know this story, you don't. As of this week, Alex Eala is sitting at approximately world number 45 after dropping 270 ranking points from her Miami Open round of 16 exit. Crushed 6-0, 6-2 by Karolina Muchova in under an hour.
Well, superb. You have to say 10 out of 10 for a performance today. Whether Eala was restricted or not, we do not know. She had new strapping on her thigh today.
Brad Gilbert publicly calling her out to dramatically improve her serve. The sunshine swing, done. For most players, that's the chapter where momentum quietly dies. But here's where the narrative flips completely. While Eala was still processing that Miami loss, something landed on her schedule that caught even seasoned WTA watchers off guard. The Linz Open, a WTA 500 event that just made history by switching to clay for the very first time in its 35-year existence, had her name already locked into the main draw. Not as a wild card, not through special invitation, she earned it. The "she gets an unexpected invitation" framing spreading across tennis circles, there's a much sharper truth behind it worth unpacking. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Perspectives like this one don't come from the mainstream coverage.
Eala from the Philippines could be the next big thing in pro tennis.
This was a massive spot to be in for such a young talent, to have a sold-out crowd completely behind.
To do well on the WTA Tour. I'm super proud of what I was able to accomplish, but the end goal is to win Slam.
So let's get into why the tennis world is genuinely stunned. The framing matters here. When the Linz Open confirmed its 2026 player list on March 12th, Eala's ranking was sitting at a career-high number 29. That number alone secured her a direct entry into the main draw. No favors, no phone calls, no tournament director making exceptions. The unexpected invitation language circulating across tennis media is technically misleading, but emotionally, it's not wrong, because the real shock isn't how she got in, it's everything surrounding her arrival. A 20-year-old from the Philippines, who started 2025 ranked number 140 and qualified into Miami as a wildcard, is now a seeded-level presence at a WTA 500 event in Europe. That trajectory, compressed into roughly 14 months, is the kind of rise the sport hasn't seen from this region of the world in the Open era. The stunned reaction isn't misplaced, it's just aimed at the wrong detail. Before breaking down what this means for Eala specifically, it's worth understanding what she's walking into. Because this edition of the Linz Open is unlike any in the tournament's history.
It's been packed for players like Alex Eala, Joao Fonseca, seeing the Filipino fans, the Brazilian fans.
137 in the world, and after this past week in Dubai, she's ranked 31.
The WTA 500 event, traditionally played on indoor hard courts, has switched to indoor clay for its 2026 edition, marking the first clay edition in its 35-year history. That single change reshapes everything. The tournament is no longer just a familiar tune-up stop, it's a genuinely new surface experience for most of the field, held inside the Design Center Linz from April 6th through 12th. The prize money sits at $1,206,446, a more than $140,000 increase from the previous year. The field reads like a compressed version of a major. 3 former champions headline it, defending champion Ekaterina Alexandrova, 2024 winners, Jelena Ostapenko, and 2014 champion Karolina Pliskova, who enters via special ranking. WTA add Barbara Krejcikova, Daria Kasatkina, Marketa Vondrousova, Emma Navarro, and Lyudmila Samsonova into the mix, and you have a draw where almost every opponent carries Grand Slam pedigree. The wild cards confirmed for this edition are 3 Austrian players, Julia Grabher, Sinja Kraus, and Lily Tagger. Everyone else earned their spot through ranking or special exemption. Eala earned hers through ranking. That distinction keeps coming back because it keeps getting lost in the coverage.
I would have been able to play a big player like Madison or like Ostapenko, but I couldn't because I lost the round before.
Star Alex Eala takes center stage at the BNP Paribas Tennis Paradise in Indian Wells.
Here's the uncomfortable math that makes Eala's clay court situation genuinely interesting. Her round of 16 exit in Miami cost her 270 ranking points, dropping her 16 places from number 29 to approximately number 45 in the live WTA rankings. That sounds like a crisis. In the context of the clay season, it's closer to a clean slate. In 2025, Eala lost in the first round of both the Italian Open and the French Open and reached only the second round in Madrid. Those results mean the points she needs to defend across the entire clay swing are negligible. While other players in the Linz draw are carrying heavy defending burdens from strong 2025 performances, Eala arrives with almost no ceiling pressure. Every point she earns from April onward is fresh accumulation, not replacement. Reaching the Linz quarterfinals alone would be enough to eclipse her entire 2025 clay court points total. That's the scale of the opportunity in front of her. A semi-final run would launch her back toward the top 35. A title, and it's not an absurd conversation given the draw, would fundamentally reframe her clay court identity heading into Roland Garros. The clay season for most established players is about protecting ground. For Eala right now, it's purely about gaining it. It would be dishonest to write around this.
Yeah, so back to your question, I really didn't want to win this way, but this is still a really big moment for me to be able to play on Stadium 1 of Indian Wells and against such a great competitor. I'm really grateful to be here and I'm super happy. Yeah. Really happy to advance to the next round. Obviously, it's not in the way I wanted it to end.
Eala's record against Czech players now stands at 0-13 after the Miami loss to Muchova, the second consecutive WTA 1000 tournament where a Czech opponent ended her run, following Linda Noskova's round of 16 win at Indian Wells. The Muchova match was particularly brutal in its clarity. From the opening point, Muchova seized control and broke Eala in the very first game. The only signs of resistance came midway through the second set, when Eala held serve in the 5th and 7th games. But by that point, the gap had already been firmly established. Brad Gilbert, watching that match, didn't hold back. He concluded publicly that Eala must dramatically improve her serve, citing the fact that she won only 36% of her first serve points against Muchova. Gilbert has worked with Andre Agassi, Andy Murray, and Coco Gauff. When he identifies a flaw in that direct a manner, it tends to carry weight across the coaching community. The Linz draw does include Barbara Krejcikova and Marketa Vondrousova, two more Czech players. Whether the 0-13 record extends further or gets its first entry on the other side of the ledger is one of the more quietly compelling subplots heading into April. The Linz entry doesn't exist in isolation. It's the product of a 2026 season that has been, by any honest measure, extraordinary for a 20-year-old navigating her first full year inside the WTA's elite tier. Eala reached the 4th round of the Australian Open, then came home for the inaugural Philippine Women's Open, an event she described to the New York Times as the highlight of her year before heading into the Middle East swing. At the Abu Dhabi Open, she reached the singles quarterfinals before losing to Alexandrova. Her campaign at the Qatar Open ended in the first round. She then reached the quarterfinals of the Dubai Championships before falling to Coco Gauff. Then came the Sunshine Swing. At Indian Wells, she reached the 4th round before losing to Linda Noskova. In Miami, seeded 31st for the first time at a WTA 1000 event, she defeated Laura Siegemund and Magda Linette, the same Linette who had just upset world number 3 Iga Swiatek, before Muchova brought the run to its abrupt end. Her career-high ranking of number 29, achieved on March 16, 2026, makes her the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA Tour history, and the first from her country to break into the top 30. Those aren't footnotes, they're the foundation of why Linz even became a conversation. Clay court tennis and indoor clay tennis are related but not identical disciplines. The switch the Linz Open has made for 2026 is worth examining beyond the surface-level observation that it's a first. Outdoor clay rewards heavy topspin, high-bouncing ground strokes, and physical endurance over long points. Indoor clay compresses rallies slightly. The ball moves faster through the air with no wind resistance, and the surface plays quicker than its outdoor equivalent. For a player like Eala, whose game is built around movement, variety, and finding angles rather than overpowering opponents, indoor clay theoretically suits her more than the grinding outdoor red clay of Madrid or Rome. Her 2025 clay results, first round exits in Rome and Paris, second round in Madrid, came on outdoor red clay, often against opponents who were bigger, heavier hitters, generating more kick than she could neutralize. Indoor Linz clay removes some of that equation. The bounce stays lower. The points don't stretch to 20 shots as frequently. A player with Eala's court sense and ability to mix pace has more tools available. None of that guarantees results, but it does mean the environment suits her profile better than the narrative of Eala struggles on clay fully accounts for. Two quotes from Eala in the aftermath of Miami deserve more attention than they received.
Alex Eala takes center stage at the BNP Paribas Tennis Paradise in Indian Wells, and of course, Filipino fans turn out in full force to cheer her on.
Of course, I'm very grateful for all the support that's been coming my way, and it's really heartwarming to see that they really they make the effort and they take the time to come out and to support, and it makes the experience for the player totally different.
Speaking after the Muchova loss, she said, "I'm super excited for the clay court swing. I think that's one surface I definitely have a lot of room for improvement, so I'll love to see how it'll pan out this year. I have some time before Linz, so I'll try to do my best to prep for that." That's not a deflection. It's a player who has genuinely mapped out where her game needs to grow. The acknowledgement of room for improvement, delivered without defensiveness, suggests someone operating with a level of self-awareness that doesn't always show up in players this early in their careers. She also addressed the weight of expectation directly. "I'm in a position where this tournament is not all or nothing. Not everything's on the line, but in regard to how I approach expectations and external noise, it's that I know my truth." That second quote is the one that should be sitting with fans longer. A player who describes their own position with that kind of clarity, at 20 after a public defeat, ahead of a surface they've historically struggled on, is not someone operating from fear. She's operating from a foundation. Whether that foundation holds under the pressure of a WTA 500 draw in April is the actual question worth watching. The stunned reaction to Eala's Linz entry reveals something about how the tennis world still processes her story. There remains a subtle disbelief embedded in the coverage, a hesitation to accept that her presence at this level is simply normal now, earned and expected rather than surprising and provisional. The unexpected invitation framing that spread after the Linz player list dropped is a symptom of that hesitation. Direct entries don't require invitations. Rankings produce them automatically. The fact that her inclusion read as news, rather than as a routine consequence of being world number 29, says more about residual perception than about reality. Eala herself described the Manila event as the highlight of her year, telling the New York Times, "Having the tournament at home was such a big thing for me just because it's such a milestone for women's tennis in the Philippines and tennis in the Philippines in general." That perspective, rooted in what tennis means at home, rather than fixated purely on rankings and results, is part of what makes her rise feel different from the standard breakthrough narrative. She carries the weight of an entire country's tennis history on her shoulders, and she's doing it while simultaneously learning how to compete at the highest level of the sport on surfaces she's still mastering. Linz is the next chapter in that education. April 6th is the opening date. Between now and then, Eala has a short window to prepare specifically for indoor clay, a surface configuration she has no WTA-level match experience on. After Linz, her schedule is expected to include the Madrid Open and the Italian Open before Roland Garros in late May. The full clay swing represents her best opportunity of the season to rebuild ranking points lost in Miami and potentially re-enter the top 30 before the grass season begins. The draw for Linz will be finalized closer to the start date. Whether Eala lands in a favorable quarter or faces a former Grand Slam champion in the opening round will shape the immediate conversation. But the medium-term reality remains the same regardless of draw position. She has minimal points to defend, a field she is more than capable of competing with, and a surface that, in its indoor configuration, removes some of the disadvantages she's faced on outdoor clay. The tennis world called it a stunner. The math says it was inevitable. What happens on the courts of Design Center Linz starting April 6th will determine which version of this story gets remembered. That's everything you need to understand what's actually at stake when Eala steps onto that indoor clay in Austria. If this breakdown gave you a sharper read on the situation than what you've been finding elsewhere, share it with another tennis fan who deserves the full picture. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Every week we take the stories the mainstream coverage flattens and give them the depth they actually require. Drop your prediction for Eala's Linz run in the comments below. Quarterfinal, semifinal, or does she go all the way and silence every remaining doubt in one swing of the clay season?